Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night.
Good night, Malaysian 370.
Breaking news tonight, a Malaysia Airlines flight with 239 people on board, including 4 Americans, has gone missing.
Scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds."
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the stream, Secret Science Wednesday. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. If there's any new viewers, thank you guys for being here as well. My name is Ashton Forbes. This is the stream where we go over science and we try to make ourselves smarter human beings on this planet. So for tonight, first thing I want to talk about is real quick the interview I had related to MH370. And then I'm going to tease something else. Kind of seems weird to say that. So if you want to skip ahead 15, 20 minutes, go ahead. And then we are going to be watching Tom Bearden, and he's going to explain how we can manipulate reality using negative energy on the quantum foam. Quantum foam, guys, the ether, the sea of energy are all around us. And it's such a mind-blowing interview. We've had a lot of Tom Bearden, like stream reviews of his content, but this one is really next level. So yeah, I felt like we needed to watch it together. Okay. So I was just on with Viva Fry, and really cool guy, really nice. And actually it was a little bit more adversarial than some of my other interviews, which I appreciated. I, in fact, like thought I could have gone much further in terms of like pushing back on some of the stuff. And to be honest with you, I'm kind of bored of just simple conversations about the evidence and stuff. And I want to, be pushed back a little bit and really try to convince people, because like Viva said, even after explaining all this, like, I just can't believe we have that technology is possible, right? It's not even that we have it, just like that it's even possible. So we can actually teleport an object with a wormhole, or whatever, even warp drive, that kind of stuff. And especially because it's from a random person like me. So the big thing is like, how do we convince people? How do we reach more people is what I want to be thinking about. And then what were the main arguments that they had in terms of disbelief? Like, I think that approaching it from the scientific angle is now the move, because now we can scientifically explain how this is possible and what, PhD physicists and engineers out there that people want for their credentials, how it's already out there. And then I think the other thing is that for my next interview to have, I'm going to have a list. I think it's important to have a preset list of questions, or not questions, but let's say topics. So I do have another interview lined up that's, we'll say, bigger than Viva Fry, as much as he's awesome. Quite a bit bigger, actually. And I think the audience will be like not necessarily just UFO based. So I want to be thinking about the issue in terms of like, how do I reach as many people as possible? Because you only get so many opportunities for the bigger podcasts in general. So what I think I'm going to do in this case, because I want to be as open as possible about my process, is I'm going to come up with a list, a bullet point list of items. So probably either the Friday stream, or I may do another stream, or we may do Monday. I don't really know. But I'm going to focus just on reviewing the consolidated evidence list for in-person interviews, or, just big interviews in general, I guess I would say. And then I can just give that list also to the host. So in a lot of cases, like, I want the host to be educated on some of the topics And I'll be like, these are going to be what my arguments are, and just present it ahead of time to them so they can see that it's all fully transparent. And that helps me to prepare as well. And they can ask me other stuff too. I don't care. I just want to say, like, these are the points I want to get to. We are the change. Don't fall for the woman in the red dress like Pavel Durov. So he's the Telegram CEO. I think he just got caught with a really hot woman, and they're now saying she was like Mossad, and so that's how he like got sucked into going to France, and then they just basically imprisoned him because he went to the wrong country. So that's the joke there for people who didn't get it. Okay, I think we're actually just ready to go on this. Okay. Yeah, and I guess what I would say, someone said they're so brainwashed the nation doesn't even land. This is the part where you can't think of brainwashing as like that person's evil. When someone's brainwashed, they're under a spell. They're stuck under the spell, and they just can't see outside of it. You know, so that's why, like, I don't get offended if somebody's like, I just can't believe this. Of course you can't. Like, look at what we're looking at. Look at what it means. It means that we've got technology that bends reality as we know it. It also means that we've been hiding it, and they've been hiding it successfully as well. Like, this is it's an ego blow to everybody who's like, oh wow, how do we not figure this out? How have they been hiding all this? And then you can get to, okay, what the hell does this mean then? If we can do this, like, what does this mean about our reality? You know? And so these are some of the questions that I'm going to probably, I think I'm going to start attacking the problem from a slightly different angle, which is on like trying to reach people, not necessarily just present the evidence. And I think part of that as well is talking about the science before I start talking about the other stuff. Like if you guys watched the interview today, I dug into the science first. I think I'm getting educated enough in the science that I can actually speak to it intelligently, especially if I have bullet points of here are the people, here are the physicists. So one of the tasks will be to make sure we get all the scientists and all the people they wrote the most important papers with, so I can just name those people off right away. That way, for the people that come try to challenge me, I can be like, well, here you go. You better get read up before you come at me with, well, this physics doesn't make sense, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Oh, Hermes, what? Disrespect, bro. Okay. So thank you, guys. Let's get started on this. Hey, PJ. Nice to see you, brother. Okay, so this one is called, I'm going to pull it up in a second. Energy from the Vacuum, Part 36, Engineering Physical Reality. We're going to give a shout out. Am I not subscribed to this guy? We're going to give a shout out to this guy because I think he like uploaded these on his YouTube. And maybe if we shout him out, then he won't, you know, he won't copyright strike me or whatever it is. Let's see. So this guy here, Davey Oneness. Okay, Davey Oneness here. You read his thing here. I'm not gonna read it all, but basically says that like he had these videos and from his private collection, he decided to upload them. So there's like all this like backroom Tom Bearden stuff out there. Pretty wild, right? Like, how often can you be like, oh yeah, you guys want some you know, buy some Tom Bearden videos in the back of a car? It's the only way you can get the Tom Bearden.
Well, let's start off by talking about
it's ridiculous. Like, people like sell this guy's stuff like it's drugs on the street. Okay, so Tom Bearden, this is the first video where I've seen Tom Bearden actually look old. At least Ponderbuck appreciates my humor. He actually looks kind of old in this video for the first time. Now, he hasn't lost a step in this video. I think I was told this was maybe mid or early 2010s or something like this, but we'll see. And the whole point here is how to use negative energy and how to conceptualize it. So I want you guys to pay attention to this. I'm going to try to not pause it until every like few minutes, and we'll see how it works. Because the concepts that he mentions are so important in terms of how to visualize the 0-point vacuum and fluctuations, the ether, however you want to call it. A lot of people say, you know, Ashton, what is the ether? How do you explain the ether? The ether is energy, which is space-time, on space-time. Or it's the layer that's on space-time itself, however you want to think of it. It's all the energy that's out there. Here we go. Let's do this.
physical reality itself. What do we mean when we use that term? What's implied by it? And where do we start? We can't start with philosophy because the philosophers never solved their own problems. What they did, they formed schools with very definite positions on each question and never reached a solution. So we wish to have, while we might not call it a solution, physicists wish to have something that can be modeled and then can be applied to do experiments that will work. And they fit their model to the experiments so that at least the model and what we know and use in the model is useful for actually doing real work and building real systems that work. It's not perfect. We know that there's no such thing as a perfect one, but at least it's very useful that way. That's the scientific method. So let's start with that, and let's start with the direct thinking of Einstein. Einstein had some very important discoveries, and he had one statement that a lot of people miss. He pointed out that space-time itself, what we call space-time, is not empty space at all. It's not at all involved. It's totally the fields and their dynamics and everything that's there. In other words, there is no emptiness. General relativity itself is all based on the fact there's no such thing as emptiness. And space-time is very, very active. If we go to quantum physics, then it's just a series of bubbles in a virtual state, way below the observable state, bubbling fiercely all the time. It's not an emptiness filled with bubbles. It is the bubbles. There is no emptiness. And so once we understand that, we can begin to understand how modern physics looks at reality. For example, if I take a glass and I hold a glass in my hand and I say, let's consider the glass. Normally, we call up a vision of a glass sitting in emptiness. Well, you see, that's wrong. Because of the way the human species developed, we had to keep our observation open for the saber tooth and for the threat that would jump out at us and could kill us with great ease. So we had to keep our observation level away from the little tiny stuff and dust grains under our feet. And we had to focus on the big things that might kill us and might hurt us. And so our observation is fitted to the idea to create a so-called emptiness with only the important stuff being shown in our observation. But when we come to that glass and we come to the fact that we start with a very simple idea, deceptively simple, considering bubbles at the end of the virtual vacuum, what we say is we write a little identity axiom. We say that the virtual particle flux of the vacuum, like the quantum guys use, the virtual particle flux is identical to space-time, is identical to energy. See, as Nobelist Feynman pointed out, we don't really have a good definition of energy. Nobody really knows what it is. It is not.
So right there, VPF equals space-time equals energy. That's pretty much what Tom Bearden is saying here. The virtual particle flux, which is the quantum foam, which is the virtual particles, the same stuff that current physicists don't really understand, can't really fully explain. That is what we have in space-time. We're in an ocean, an energy ocean. That's what space-time is. And we're seeing the ripples on the surface. And we have all this energy to dig into here. He says the physicists build their models. This is the problem. He's basically saying that the physicists don't see they don't see it in the right light because they're not actually engineering it to see what the actual outcomes are. Because if you're stuck inside a medium, it's very hard to detect the medium because it's all around you. It's like being a fish stuck in a fish tank, but you can't ever get out. So you can't see there's a whole nother atmosphere of world that's out there. Space-time is not empty space. So I give the analogy just like, the lake or the ocean isn't empty. It's filled all the way up. All the water is coming from the ocean. We just don't understand the interaction between the two because the water in this case is not observable. It's below our observable state. And the reason is because evolutionarily, we only care about big things that are around us. We don't care about things that are quantum in size. It's not really how our reality dictates who lives and who dies. But if saber-toothed tiger or whatever it was comes out after me and takes me out, I need to be able to see that. So evolutionarily, that's why we don't see the very quantum or the small scales. We don't see that's how the universe works. Our perception, our senses are really what dictates our reality. And then really what is the energy? It's small bubbles on the tiniest scales and the Planck scales all around us everywhere. You have to think of nothing as being empty, just like a series of bubbles that you're sifting through all the time. An ocean of space. I actually like the bubbles analogy. So I think we're going to go with bubbles from now on. So Tom Bearden's already contributed because and again, these are just concepts for us to conceptually understand like an extra dimension of space, which is what we're dealing with here when we're dealing with this energy. We're dealing with an extra dimension. That's why we don't actively perceive it, but it's there. We feel it as inertia when we're walking through it. Here we go.
Not the capacity to do work because work is a change of form of energy. If you've got some energy, you can do work because you.
So he asked Feynman, Feynman, asked what even is energy? Let me just go back like 5 seconds.
The capacity to do work because.
Like here, maybe.
identical to energy. See, as Nobelist Feynman pointed out, we don't really have a good definition of energy. Nobody really knows what it is.
So we're on the money with Feynman, right? Like we're bringing Feynman up as many times as we can bring Feynman up. Why? Because Feynman was on the Manhattan Project. So he's a legend, right? And he's the one who talks about the amount of energy we have in a coffee cup is equivalent to or more than enough to boil all the Earth's oceans. And it turns out Feynman didn't believe Ken Shoulders when Ken Shoulders was going through exotic vacuum objects, but later on came back and apologized and said, yes, it is possible based on the math. So Feynman is an OG, right? So we bring him up as much
It
as
is not the capacity to do work, because work is a change of form of energy.
And he says, what even is energy? It's not the capacity to do work.
Got some energy, you can do work because you can change the form to another form. But the energy itself is not the power to do that. It's just the fact that you got to have energy to do it, to change its form. There are plenty of papers that point out that the idea that energy is capacity to do work is wrong. So now we're back to this basic statement that in our view that we're going to take.
So then the question is, okay, what is energy? He's basically saying that energy is the capacity to do work, which is to do work in a system. That's wrong. That's not how the math plays out. So then the question is, okay, well, what even is energy? Well, you can imagine, well, energy is just what we're sucking directly from the ether all the time. You know, it's another dimension that we're not perceiving, but that we're extracting from there all the time, like a vast ocean. And every time you pull something out of that ocean, it's being replenished.
From everything we look at with reality and experiments and energy crisis and all of this, we're going to always be considering virtual particle flux, that is the bubbles in the virtual state vacuum, is identical to space-time, if we're talking general relativity, and it's identical to energy. That simple, deceptive statement, phrase like Einstein might have made it, is in fact the way, or a way, to unify physics and give you a unified physics model. So when we start with that, we have a different picture, which is taken right out of modern physics again, of what an observed reality is. I live in a world with glasses and tables and lamps and all kinds of things and automobiles and things. Let's start with the virtual state bubbles themselves. In physics, we have this bubbles, a set of bubbles all the time. And when I'm talking positive energy, sometimes the energy adds in those interactions that are going on amongst the bubbles. And that forms a little bit bigger bubble and a higher energy, and it's a formation, it's an organization. And then some of those interact to form a higher level set of bubbles. Pretty soon we reach the observable level, the quantum, and now we have quanta, we have real photons. The energy continues to combine as we go up and continue our interactions. And so we get to electrons, we get to protons, we get to nuclei, we get to molecules. For example, let's take the water molecule. The highest level on that chain we described is the OH bond. That's the last thing that was made to weld hydrogen and oxygen together to form the water molecule. But the water molecule itself is an ongoing series of all these bubbles and statistical underlying operations, building up all the way to that water bubble. And the way we got the bubble was to create the OH bond. That is continually being created and sustained as this set of underlying statistical operations. Now, if we're using just positive energy, if we're thinking in terms of that, we got addition. The less probability, the higher you go, so the highest energy thing's the last thing formed. But what you have is, you have it all comes from this set of interlocking interactions, and it's continually being created and continually being maintained by this set of operations. It is that set of operations. That's what physical reality really is. If I introduce now, suppose I tickle the vacuum a little bit.
So that's pretty wild, right? What he just says right there in terms of, okay, well, how do you even then perceive reality? If we are just these flowing electrons flowing around in a stream, in a field, in an ocean, then what even is reality at that point? And he basically says that things get more and more complicated. Essentially, they kind of work their way up. And if you want to think of it, you can think of it like, I at least think of it in terms of like a computer program. It's getting more and more complex. There's a series of rules, a hierarchy of rules. A lot of database coding is like, here's the hierarchy of rules that you should run down. And as they get to a certain point, they get to a part where they become observable. That's the smallest scales that we can visually see that are out there. And they keep getting more complex. We have elements form molecules, and then we get molecules of water, for example. And so Tom Bearden is basically saying there's a tree, or however you want to think of it, these increasing complexity. And then if you understand the code, then what he's going to get to here is this idea of, well, you can bring it down a level. You can bring it down a level from where it basically is at. And the way this is possible is because these interactions are continually being created, he's saying. So like when the magnet is stuck to the refrigerator, it's constantly sucking energy and being recreated from the ether, from the vacuum, because it's sitting there stuck to the refrigerator all the time, which is just an interesting way to look at it.
I don't like that water molecule. I'd like to be able to burn that hydrogen in that oxygen, and I'd like to get that hydrogen and that oxygen separated. Now, our normal folks and engineers and all, and even a lot of the physicists tell you the only way you can do that, you've got to tear it apart by brute force, pull it apart, force it apart. You don't have to do any such thing. If you tickle the vacuum way back down in the bubbles, you tickle the basic element of bubbles down there so that they now contain negative energy tickles as well as positive energy tickles. Now we have a different thing. All throughout that whole chain of things that we built up to have this water molecule, we are now adding negative energy to reduce the energy all along, reducing the probability of the next highest stage a little bit. And the first thing that will go will back up. The OH bond will just disappear. It will unhappen. I didn't have to tear it apart. I just had to tickle the vacuum just a little bit to do that. And I'll use, for example, the Kanzius proven process. Kanzius uses this mechanism without realizing the mechanism. All he does is make a lot of little RF pulses, little sharp gradient pulses, a little tiny bit of energy in each one, but not much. But each little pulse, what it does, it pops out some electrons from the Dirac C. And that leaves behind the empty Dirac holes. Well, a Dirac hole, a Dirac C hole, is actually a negative mass energy electron. It is not a positron. And Dirac never really said it was a positron. He said that you couldn't detect the hole directly. But if you move the hole aside so it's replaced by a field hole, that's a change from -1 to 0, which is a +1 change. You'll see it as if it were a positive electron change with positive mass and positive charge. The charge went the other way too. And so you will see it as what we call a positron. That is not the hole, that's a replacement of the hole. And in physics, a great resistance to negative energy has occurred, and they forcibly removed negative energy from most of physics, particularly from Dirac theory, in 1934. Leading physicists were astounded when they realized it allowed them to directly engineer physical reality itself, and that scared them the daylights out of them.
Wow.
So they forced it back out of quantum field theory, has occurred, and they forcibly removed negative energy from most of physics, particularly
Here we go.
From Dirac theory in 1934. Leading physicists were astounded when they realized it allowed them to directly engineer physical reality itself, and that scared them the daylights out of them.
Wow. So yeah, I mean, negative energy is not what experts say. Exactly. That you got to think about that. This is the crazy part where you start to realize like this shit's all real. You're like, literally negative energy, and the concept of negative energy is not some exotic substance. Like they don't even teach the concept of negative energy correctly in physics. Therefore, they're just not allowed to like talk about it, because just like in all institutions, they get corrupted, and academia is no different. So he said even back in 1934, they removed the negative energy. But let's get back to the stuff that's most important. Is he says, when we are separating hydrogen and oxygen in water, for example, we're doing it the hard way. We don't have to rip it apart. We don't have to try to rip the molecules apart, which is huge amounts of energy. Instead, he says, just tickle the vacuum. Tickle, tickle the vacuum a little bit. Sorry, let me play my thing that I want to play.
All right, then, keep your secret.
Tickle the vacuum, and you can cause a negative energy interaction, which will basically just cause the state of the system to drop down a level. In the case of the water molecule, it causes them to separate into hydrogen and oxygen. And now this is really interesting, because if you can actually affect reality on that level with a small input of energy, manipulating the 0-point field, and basically undoing, like knocking a block off your hierarchy, actually really knocking the top block off your hierarchy, then that's a completely different way to interact with the vacuum, interact with our reality in general, compared to what we think about, where he says trying to rip them apart. And he says Kanzius, which I'll have to try to get the spelling for us. Kanzius uses RF pulses. That's radio frequency pulses. So you start to realize like a lot of this just comes down to using pulses of energy of in various frequencies. It seems like the higher the better, and then getting into like a resonant standing wave. And what's a resonant standing wave? Where your wave just doesn't look like it's moving at all, and it's coherent, as opposed to just it's like perfect wave. Okay. And then the Dirac holes theory he brings in here, which is, I'm not sure how much I love this concept, but the concept that we pull the energy out of the ether. We pull it out, and what's left behind is a hole, is a vacant area where there's no energy. And so some energy has to come in and fill that hole. And I think what he's saying here is that's what the positrons are. And then that electrons are just what we've pulled out. I could be wrong, though. I'm still not fully smart enough, but we're getting there.
So they forced it back out of quantum field theory, forced it out of several other things like Dirac's electron theory, couldn't get it out of quantum electrodynamics, just welded in there. But they got it out of everything they could. And they beat the other physicists to death just about if they resisted it. So today we have most of physics is devoid of the negative energy. So they will not have to face the awful ramifications of being able to deliberately engineer physical reality as you wish if you develop that technology. But anyway, when we tickle the vacuum and get this negative energy froth in it, we lower the probabilities of the higher level energy things that happened and are being continually created and sustained. And take that water molecule, the last thing that happens and the first thing that goes is the OH bond. It just simply falls apart into hydrogen and oxygen without any extra energy or anything that you have to add other than tickling the vacuum. The vacuum does it. The negative energy and negative probabilities do it.
What the fudge, chat? We're appealing to children, so we're not going to swear anymore, chat. But what? He basically says we can just tickle it and the molecule will just fall apart. Molecule will just fall apart and we reduce the probability. I've never heard anybody talk about it in terms of probability. But why is that important? The double slit experiment. The double slit experiment's really just a matter of probability. When the double slit experiment goes through and we don't use a detector, you see an interference pattern, which is basically a standard probability wave. And when you try to measure in the double slit experiment, the wave pattern breaks down. Instead, you just get two slits. You go from a probabilistic situation to a deterministic one. To me, this opens the door of like, we are definitely in the holographic principle, which is like all the information is on the exterior of the black hole, but it really just means that like what we perceive as our reality is a lesser level dimension that someone, like we're flat on a dimension of somebody able to look down on us. We're not as far apart as we seem, let's say.
And so this gives us hydrogen and oxygen. And it's pretty safe because in the area where we have done this tickling, we have the tickled vacuum. It's very difficult to make an OH bond that is suppressed pretty well in this area. Very difficult to make one. Well, to explode or burn, the hydrogen and the oxygen have to combine with an O2 with an OH bond and make water molecule. So what you said is it has a great inhibition against exploding or burning. But if you just simply pipe it aside for 7 or 8 inches out of the container where you're tickling the vacuum, and you're dissolving or unhappening the OH bonds statistically here and there to get your hydrogen and oxygen gas. If you pipe the gas bubbles aside a few inches away into the combustion chamber of a combustion engine, you're now in an area again where the vacuum is normal. It's not tickled and it has no little negative energy froth in it. And so what happens is you're back to where the OH bond would love to be born if you would just let it. And all you have to do is ignite the hydrogen in the oxygen that's already present. It burns nicely to make water vapor, and out the exhaust goes water vapor and powers your car or your combustion engine, your train, your ship, whatever you are using the engine to.
Okay, so I think he just said there that you can use negative energy, hit water with negative energy, and the molecules will just fall apart. And it will release energy, presumably. And then you can basically take those hydrogen and oxygens, move them somewhere else where there is no negative energy action happening into like an engine. And those will then, run a motor and you can operate a device with that as well. Just right there. That's just a simple mechanism of, I guess, fission and maybe fusion.
To power. And so we could be powering the world off of water gas very easily and very quickly if we would use the Kanzius proven process that uses this mechanism I've just described to unhappen the OH bond. Now, the reason I use the Kanzius process,
the way he says unhappen makes me feel like he's unhappened a few people before, like just unhappen that. We've got a guy who's a little close to free energy. Okay, just unhappen that. No, just kidding, Tom Bearden. You're the GOAT. You're the GOAT.
Gas, as you know, has a history of at least 30, 40 years with various people who've discovered to one degree or another how to do this. The reason I use Kanzius as an example is because once he had this process working, he took it to a world-renowned water chemist. And this water chemist tested this every which way from breakfast. About 50 tests he did of it, very rigorous tests. When he was finished, he authenticated the validity of the fact that this actual water falling apart into the hydrogen and oxygen does occur. And he said, this is the greatest advance in water chemistry in 100 years. So we have the completion of the scientific method. We have the independent validation and verification of it by an independent scientist of note.
This has been done recently.
Yes, this has been done fairly recently. Kanzius is being very quiet about his water gas project right now because he's in the business of filing his patent. But his process was absolutely validated by independent scientists of real renown and real ability. And Kanzius did not develop this to do water gas. That was just a happenstance. He himself had developed cancer, and he developed a cancer cure. He developed the process to cure cancer. If I have cancer that grows in some tissue, look at the tissue now, and the underlying bubbles all the way from the virtual state vacuum that gives you the structure and the things in the tissue, and then gives you the cancer as being a higher energy addition to that. So if I start unhappening the energy additions, the first thing that will go will be the cancer. I can unhappen the cancer. I don't have to burn it. I don't have to harshly drug it and all this stuff at all. I just got to tickle the local vacuum around it, and it will then unhappen.
Okay, I'm going to first go ahead and just do a disclaimer. This is not medical advice whatsoever, although I will say, God, can I switch the screen without this being super annoying? Let's find out. I did find this thing about Kanzius here, chat. Kanzius machine, new cancer treatment idea from unexpected source. This is published in Nature. So this is a real thing. It says he was a TV engineer. This is a pretty weird backstory. The radio frequency transmitter, basically, that he produced here. So we're probably going to want to look this up, because what are we trying to figure out at this point, chat? If you've been along with me on this whole journey, you should know what we're trying to obtain, where we're at science-wise. What are we trying to figure out in terms of what we need to do, chat? I want to hear your opinions, but, I mean, what did this guy build, chat, based on what we just heard here? So he's basically, Tom Bearden's like, we can use negative energy, and we can tickle the vacuum with it, and then we can unhappen bonds, we can unhappen cancers, or I think it was cancers, tumors, whatever, you know? Because we can target them and they'll just move down a scale from their complexity level, basically. Because that's what negative energy will do. Okay, the answer is we're looking for a negative energy device. Okay, so this could be a negative energy device then, basically. We need to know exactly how it's working, though. Let's see what it says. It says he was kills cells by inducing radio waves emitted by a needle electrode that clinicians must insert into a tumor. Yeah, so the thing is, you have to have it. It has to be targeted. Even for theoretically this to work, you've got to target the exact area of the tumor, right? Because you don't want to damage. If you use this on any other part of the body, it's going to be very dangerous. So it gives off heat vibes, a receiver that absorbs them, and a copper plate dispersive pad placed against the body that sends RF signals to the ground. Okay, well, whatever. Let's go to back to the video. So that's Kanzius's thing. Here we go.
This process, Kanzius got it working. He has turned it over to one of the legitimate cancer research institutes who is proceeding apace with developing this cure. Well, there's, as you know, a very long series of things you have to go through to get approval for any kind of new medical treatment or cure. They have just completed phase 1 animal tests, and they had wonderful success. 100% of simple, easy cures of all the lab animal tumors. 100%. Unprecedented. So you can see what we're talking about. As we learn gradually to engineer the shape and form and interactions of this negative energy froth we create in the vacuum by tickling it so that we unhappen things, we can eventually be able to design it for a specific thing that we wish to unhappen. For example, wouldn't it be nice if we had a way to unhappen HIV? We've just discovered we've got a lot more of it in this country than anybody ever admitted, and the figures showed. Lots more. And it's rampant in several other places in the world, particularly poor nations. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just unhappen very easily and very simply by tickling the vacuum that the human body is in, and we could unhappen HIV? That will come if we ever get this thing started through our scientific community.
When you're talking about
he loses me when he takes it to the HIV stuff, but I get his point.
being able to cure cancer and remove tumors, how do you determine, cancer tissue from, normal healthy tissue?
That would come from the development of the technology. For example, as the technology developed, one of the things you develop is instrumentation, so that you can make measurements and determine the things you need to determine to make up your mind and decide what to do and how to form this, how to shape that. So the instrumentation that would be developed would be able to tell you that. Now, we have tests today that'll tell you the difference between tumorous and non-tumorous tissue. But what we would need would be something that you didn't have to have him under all kind of lights and in a big X-ray machine and all like that. Wouldn't be that hard. Wouldn't be that hard to do.
So they're basically saying that some of this stuff is obviously conceptual, in terms of like actually removing all the HIV in your system. That's obviously a conceptual thing because you have to be able to target just the parts that are sick or that you want to revert. Otherwise, you're going to cause major damage to somebody's body. So once again, this is not medical advice whatsoever. Just talking about physics and tickling the quantum vacuum, everybody, with negative energy. So he's saying that the instrumentation, your materials science, and your lab equipment also needs to scale up. If you get to a point where you have nano robots that can individually detect the sickened diseased cells, then you could send them on little suicide missions where they reverse engineer or reverse down the sickness in all the areas you need it to.
But that would come with the development. And so usually if the tumor's been there a while, you can recognize it just by looking at it. And so now your question is to recognize the border. The way Kanzius does is he puts some little nanocrystals around the
nanocrystals, everybody,
tumor tissue, so that he can focus this RF chips, chatter in there. And to get his patent, he's probably going to have to state that therefore he burns the tumor tissue. And that, of course, is not what he's doing at all. But
how funny is this? So his thing was talking about burning the tissue. That's literally what it said in there before. And now Tom Bearden's like, yeah, no, it's not really burning it. He had to say that because otherwise it's not considered possible. But at the end of the day, like, you just care that it works, right? When you're getting the patent, it works. You don't care if people, in fact, it's better if other people don't think that it works, and it really does. Because then you have a monopoly over the board, pretty much. So this is why, like, when you look the legit patents up, like Hal Puthoff's patent, I'm definitely going to bring that up, by the way. Let me write that down on my board. Hal Puthoff's patent is literally just called communication device. You kidding me? Communication device? Can't get any more generic than that.
The patent office is not going to give him a patent for unhappening the cancer tumor. They will give him a patent for burning it. And so he'll probably have to file as burning it. Patent office, by the way, does force people to lie about their invention sometime, because your problem in getting a patent, you may know perfectly well how it works, but you're going to have to find an explanation that the patent office will accept. And guess what they are? For power stuff, they're all electrical engineers. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have to get by the electrical engineers to get a patent accepted. A good example, for example, is Tom Bearden, who full PhD. He was a patent examiner, and Tom was more understanding. He understood that not everything was, just standard electrical engineering, and he would look at an actual patent application and try to make up his mind whether that was a legitimate statement of something that could be done or not. He didn't apply just electrical engineering. Well, patent office fired him illegally. Right. He finally wound up suing the patent office, winning the suit. They had to take him back, and then they fired him again on something. But you are...
That's crazy. So the patent office basically is a bunch of electrical engineers, and if they think something's not possible, then they'll just gatekeep you and say your patent's not possible. So inventors that know this stuff's real, especially in the black projects, they just call it other shit. They just lie about what their patent does so that it can be understood by the idiots who don't believe this stuff's possible. How funny is that? And that makes sense why Hal Puthoff's thing is just called communication device. Like he's not calling it like gravity wave communication, because if you call it that, then everyone's going to be like, okay, what does this guy know? But no, instead he's keeping it under the radar.
Confronted by the necessity for a patent because you have no rights other than your patent rights. The other thing you have is, to my way of thinking, there's a gross miscarriage of justice in intellectual property rights between inventors and authors, for example. If I write a city paper or a book or something, and copyright's real cheap, real simple, I don't have to have a lawyer or anything. All I do is file a copy of it. It automatically is copyrighted, and I got a list, copyright with a circle, 1942 Bearden. But it's good for my life plus 70 years. And at best, the inventor who files a patent, he's got to have a good patent attorney, particularly if it's anything like what we're talking about. If he doesn't have an excellent patent attorney, he'll never get anywhere. It really knows how to write it up right and get through the patent office. And even when he stays in there and pays all the money and gets through at great expense and finally gets a patent, he's only got about 18 years or so. That's it. So here on the one hand, if I write a screenplay or something, I got my lifetime plus 70 years protection. And if I work for 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 years developing this invention on the bench, and I finally fight my way and pay all that money and all to get a patent, I only got at best about 18 years. That's a sort of a gross difference in the way we treat intellectual property rights. Of course, in writing, you got all the screen people and movie people, and you got a lot of very rich and powerful people that insist that's that way. Inventors are just sort of a motley horde, and so they.
Damn, sorry guys, I was muted. Yeah, this is a really good argument. I hadn't heard this, which is this argument that if you write a screenplay or other intellectual property related to movies, TV, what have you, you get it for 75 years. But if you invent something like this, you only get it for 18, I think he said, which is like, that's not even like your whole life. That's not even like a quarter of your life. So if you invent something, you only get like 18 years. So compared to like writing a fantasy story, like that's completely disproportionate. When people invent stuff with their patents, it probably should be worth a lot longer, honestly. Because the other thing is it's really easy to just see the patents that work and then just change a couple things and steal it. Like it's trivial to steal it, honestly.
They don't have that kind of representation. But I really think we should have better protection than we do. So, and particularly in a patent, you can only patent what you claim, what claims they'll recognize. And so it really takes a really fine patent attorney to even get a patent in this area of unusual energy systems. We got one on the MEG, but I'll tell you, we had a very fine attorney, and he worked very hard to get it done. And we had to answer credible questions from the patent office and furnish written copies of references and all kinds of things. They just flat didn't want to believe the Aronoff bomb effect even existed. And there's thousands of papers on it in the hard physics literature, but it's not electrical engineering. So they didn't want to believe such an effect like that even existed.
So if you produce anything that has
Yeah, that is wild. So like, do you guys realize what he had to go through just for the MEG? People are like, just patent it. The reason why they're doing that is they're trolling, because they know the patent office is a bunch of gatekeepers. And it's super expensive to even get it done. You have to do a review process. I can only imagine everything costing more and more money. So like, this is where like you start to see the problem in terms of getting the information out there. There's like millions of gatekeeps of every single aspect of this whole phenomenon of free energy and some of the gravity science as well. So it just gets to a point where the people that know, they just sell it. And actually, the quieter it is, the better, because that way they don't have to deal with patent office stuff. It's better if they don't even have to patent it, because that way they can just sell it to people. And then they don't have to answer any questions,
electricity in it to the patent office, it's an electrical engineer that looks at it.
Almost inevitably.
Yeah.
And what we're doing really demands a very well-educated physicist to look at, because it's physics, not electrical engineering. It's totally not contained in the electrical engineering model. The first thing in energy from the vacuum you have to do is violate electrical engineering, because only an asymmetrical model will do that system, and all the electrical engineer builds are symmetrical systems. So your first job is to violate the dickens out of electrical engineering. That puts you at odds with the patent office to begin with. So it's kind of a crazy dance, you're dancing around, the attorney is with the patent office and trying to find some way that you can get a viable patent on something you've actually got, and very difficult to do it.
I mean, it's not just electrical stuff that gets patented, it's mechanical and computer stuff. And
yes, but see, they're pretty well within the state of the art, or pretty well within the knowledge. Another area that you can get patents in, you can get patents in an area that's been recognized, even though it's still experimental, like nanocrystalline area. You will have a nanocrystalline physicist review your patent. And so he will be aware of the fact that this is still a developing area, and the fact that you've got different phenomenology that never even appeared in electrical engineering. But unless you fall in some recognized area, you will have problems with your patent if it's outside electrical engineering, particularly.
So the only reason I'm pausing here is because I want people to realize like the big part of the issue and how it's kept hidden. Like this is it. Like it's very important to understand how this has actually been kept hidden, because that almost seems almost as unbelievable as the science itself. How we kept this hidden? Well, you listen into it. There's all this bureaucracy, red tape, just straight up disbelief, because people are like, you can't tell people they've been tricked. You can't tell people they've been taught wrong. They go, no, I was taught that this is impossible, therefore it's not. Like in a lot of cases, it literally doesn't even matter if it works or not. The engineers like, they already know it works. We've seen the effects. And when he says Aronoff Bohm, it's because if you respect that the Aronoff Bohm exists, then you must respect the idea that we're in an ocean of energy, because otherwise, how are potentials with no electromagnetic fields causing the interference pattern to shift? The whole point is a solenoid prevents limits the electromagnetic fields, but they're still in effect. So you got to explain it. It's like it's just what we see,
Energy area. So, for example, Kanzius wanting to patent his water gas, he's going to have a problem. And trying to patent his cancer process, he's going to have a problem. He's going to have to almost certainly state that his patent attorney will probably write it that it burns the cancer, because they understand it. They'll accept that. But if you tell them it unhappens the cancer, they'll say, you know,
Magic.
yeah, whose leg are you trying to pull, you know?
So when you talk about unhappening things, unhappening diseases, this could be from something as mild as, say, athlete's foot to brain cancer.
That's true. Anything at all, because remember the little scenario we went through in modern physics. If I really press it and look at it rigorously, everything. I'm going to start with one of these terms. Now I'm going to start with the virtual particle flux, one of my three terms. I'm using energy, I'm using space-time, but I'm going to consider it and model it as virtual particle flux. So here I've got all these virtual particles. There is no emptiness. There's just lots of bubbles of different sizes and interactions and going crazy. Now, if I look at the positive energy parts of this, some of these add together to give me a higher energy. They couple, let's say, and give me twice as much energy. Then some of those add, and some over here don't have one adds, and I get three, and I get all levels of energy coming up and structures being formed. Less and less probabilities I go up. But as I come up, eventually I'm going to hit the observable threshold. In other words, it's big enough now, it's a quantum in size. So now I've got what we call real observable particles. I've got an electron, I've got a proton, I've got things like this. Bingo, I got a bond that makes those protons hang together in the nucleus. One of them is a neutron. So I'm tying them together with bonds. It's being made in the nucleus. Bingo, I got a atomic nucleus. Bingo, I got electrons around it. I got atoms. Oh, bingo, I got bonds now that tie these together in molecules. Bingo, I got structures, lattices that these molecules and everything organize in, and I got materials now. I get my material science and everything. But everything at every level is continually being created and replenished by these bubbling interactions, all underlying it, and the positive probabilities of something higher happening, because it came from positive energy only. That's all it was considered. Now, if I add some negative energy back in here to change those probabilities, I start adding negative energy all the way back up here, and the last highest thing that occurred is going back up. This is the simplest approach. So in the case of water gas, the last highest thing in that water molecule was that OH bond, and it just vanished. In this region where I added the positive energy, the negative energy vacuum to tickle it, right now it won't allow this OH bond to be made except with great difficulty. So a lot of your OH bonds now are not being continually made and replenished, and so they are disappearing. And I'm now having what we call water gas, H2 bubbles and O2 bubbles coming out.
Sorry, I'm muted again. Okay, so this is pretty wild because he's talking about cold fusion here again. Like, this is what he's talking about here is sonoluminescence. I mean, this is where when we see sonoluminescence, we're seeing star in a jar. It's in a jar of water. And sound is causing there to be like a little singularity there of a star being born. Really high temperatures because the bonds are breaking apart. Like, how is this possible without super high temperatures? How is sonoluminescence possible? How are we seeing like little fusion occur? Well, the answer is because we're doing something different. We're tickling the vacuum. We're tickling the vacuum. The bonds are falling apart and they're releasing a huge amount of energy. This is 0 point energy. This is the essence of it. Is that we can cheat the system. Once we know the rules, we can cheat the system. And Tom Bearden says we can take the most recent thing that happened and we can unhappen it from the time scale. Basically, literally send it backwards. I think this is a good question. Someone asked, I was thinking about Malcolm's thunderstorm generator. It's same as the concepts. When it comes to low energy nuclear reactions, yes, it's the idea that under the right conditions, we can cause fusion to happen, or fission. I think you can look at it either way, like the deconstruction or recombination of molecules.
And being formed.
In this case, they're just using water too. So there's a whole nother element of this where it's like, we're talking about just water doing this. If water can do this and we can actually, and maybe Stanley Meyer was right, I don't know. But if he was, and we can just undo the bonds like this, then we can use the most plentiful resource on our earth as infinite energy. So, I mean, we don't even have to look at the issue of like, hey, do we have to build this, energy device that extracts the energy? Like, we can just make fusion happen, cold fusion. They call it cold because it's not the temperatures. It doesn't require the system and temperatures of the sun, much lower temperatures than that. Oh, what does Jeremy have to say? So we just build a bomb that destroys the entire solar system with energy from the vacuum? Yeah, pretty much. That's the logical conclusion. If there's this sea of energy, we can literally just build a bomb that destroys the entire solar system, guaranteed. Like, you're thinking small. Like we can build a black hole that could just wipe away our entire galaxy or maybe our entire universe, or the opposite. Make a big bang ourselves. This is why, in my opinion, I'm going to flip over to full screen because this question is so important. Because I think anybody that concludes that, yes, we can do this, yes, we can extract energy, if you're somebody like Jeremy, who's a physicist mind, you're like, well, that just means we can destroy the whole universe. This is what Oppenheimer and the guys in the Manhattan Project were afraid of. I think they figured it out back then. They figured out we don't even need a nuclear bomb. Like, we can just pull the energy straight out of the vacuum with like a plasma, a coherent plasma, and we can create whatever destructive force we want. And then you look and you go, we're not going to last. There's no way we're going to last. Not with this kind of weaponry. And then you look at through the lens of the UFO phenomenon and how these Lou Elizondo, Jeremy Corbell's, all these guys, Ross Coulthart, they talk about it. They never talk about the weaponization and what it can actually pull off. Because I think anybody that knows the truth about the technology, like we see here, you realize its true power is unlimited. And that means that, you know, we have to really be thinking about that in terms of like what Peter Thiel said on Joe Rogan. We might need to be all altruistic, or we might need to be like space Nazis in order to be like, keep us from destroying ourselves with the technology. Otherwise, you'll always have outsiders who will, or not outliers, who will go rogue and suicide bomb destroy us all. They're afraid what happened at Trinity. I don't know what Trinity is. Is Trinity probably one of these like reactors or something like that? We literally should be afraid of that. If you're going to be afraid of anything, be afraid of that. Let's not be afraid of nuclear weapons because it's so insignificant relative to the size that we're talking about with, like, I like to call them scalar weapons, but really infinite power.
And they're not too explosive while it's still in this water in this area, this little region where I'm tickling the vacuum, because
you meant when they thought they were going to destroy and vaporize the ignite the atmosphere? Yeah. I think the bigger issue is that you build a cascading black hole that just grows and grows and grows, and it's over before we even know it. It's just over before we know it. So this is why, if I was worried about it, which I am, I would say anywhere where somebody's building a high-powered laser and where people are messing with plasma and Bose-Einstein condensates, those would be places would be my highest priority of checking out. And advanced microchips. The smaller you can make your microchip, the more powerful you're going to be able to make this technology. And I don't know if there's a limit. So imagine like one more thought. Imagine like this technology is so powerful that it's like a race to figure out who makes the universe ending device. Like, who makes the Big Bang weapon, the Big Bang bomb. First person to make the Big Bang bomb wins. If you look at it from that perspective, that makes the most sense to me in terms of what's going on with all this shit geopolitically, et cetera, related to this technology. Okay, sorry, here we go.
OH bond, if they want to explode, they got to get together and burn to make OH bond, make water molecule. They burn to make water, or explode to make water. If you can't make the OH bond, you can't make a water molecule, you can't explode. So it's real difficult for them to explode or combust right here where it's going on. But if I take and I pipe this gas a few inches away from this container where I'm tickling my vacuum and unhappening the OH bond, so my water molecules are beginning to fall apart, all of them on, I don't have to pay for it. If I go a few inches outside that zone where the vacuum is tickled and has a negative energy and those negative probabilities in all those little sustaining underlying statistical interactions, all of a sudden, I'm not in the tickled vacuum anymore. I'm in a normal vacuum. And now the OH bond loves it. They love the OH bond, see, the interactions do. So now when I put my H2 and my O2, they're already to the exact right ratio to make water. I put them in here in this little combustion chamber of a combustion engine. Boy, they'll burn like mad. And all they do is make water molecules, water vapor that goes out the end there. So I have got water gas. I can power a combustion engine with the basic water input once I tickle the vacuum in its end being used to provide the fuel.
So he's just like telling how we can make the orbs, right? Like the first thing I'm thinking about here, he's like, okay, we're just going to tickle some negative energy, like a negative energy laser, right? And we're just going to manipulate the water gas that's in the atmosphere, and bonds are just going to break. We're going to maybe get energy from that. And then we're going to just move it through like a pipe, to a different area where there's no laser beam. And this area, they're going to start to recombine. And we're going to use that steam that they form as turning our engine. So we're going to use that as our fuel source. Like, what the hell? That is actually really similar to the thunderstorm generator in concept, at least. And so, yeah, that part, I'm like, wow, even something that simple, like that could explain the orbs. Maybe the orbs, and I'll show the orbs. I think I'm going to send them the videos ahead of time too. I want people to have the videos so they can look at them. To me, I think this explains how these orbs can do what they're doing here. Now, we were going to do Bose-Einstein condensate today, guys, but I didn't get to read enough scientific papers to really dig into it. But what I will say as a little spoiler is that I saw a bunch that have similar heat signatures of the Bose-Einstein condensates papers and stuff that I was looking at. So I thought it was really interesting in terms of, that's what I think we see going on here. That's why we see the heat signature in one side of it as well. Because you can imagine if you have to move it from one area to another, now you have a situation where you might create your heat signature thing here you got going on. Why didn't they just see that? Okay.
So I'm still using things that burn fuel. I'm still using some of our sunk costs in a lot of stuff we've developed. But now I can power automobile engines with that. I can power truck engines. I can power train engines, particularly ships. One of the dirtiest things on this planet for polluting is ship power. I can power the ship engines cleanly. I can clean that all up just like that. So water gas is very practical because I'm taking water from the environment. I'm putting water back, the exact same thing back. I'm not replacing it with some harsh stuff that's going to strangle everybody to death or something. And the oceans have such huge reservoirs of it. I can take the water from anywhere and give the water time to get back in the ocean.
You wouldn't have to have tanks on the ships.
No. And so just by going to water gas alone, we could go a long way. I'm considering this only as a stopgap measure. I'm after self-powering, see. But if we want to take advantage of all this stuff we've already paid for and billions and billions, even trillions of dollars sunk costs in it, we can save that whole end of all our huge power systems from the steam boiler on to where the generators are feeding the distribution lines and feeding the cities. We can save all of that we've already bought and paid for and we're already using. We already got people trained in. They're already checking it and everything. We can save it. Okay, let's continue with a little bit about this area if it ever.
Chad, I mean, that's so huge. He's basically saying, like, it's funny. He says, okay, we can make cold fusion from this just using water. We can just make cold fusion happen, break the bonds, reform the bonds. Sure. And then we can use the water up. But he's like, I want energy where it's just no source whatsoever needed. Because he gives a concept there for we can just have infinite energy due to how much water we have, which is practically unlimited. At least from our scales. And it will just replenish through the system. So it's not actually going anywhere. Versus, no, I just want to be able to directly extract energy is basically what he says. I want just solid state systems just extracting energy. No cost, self-sufficient.
It gets born. Kanzius does not appear to be aware at all of this mechanism. And physicists themselves are going to have to be very leery to even address the issue. Because in physics today, you toe the line with the current doctrine or else you get destroyed. Even Dirac, who defended negative energy at first, had to help change his own theory. And so you can easily destroy your entire career and every chance you have of doing anything in the future if you do not watch very carefully what you do and if you deviate too far from the status quo. That's well known that you have a real strong limitation on your conventional science and scientists themselves. So if we can ever get this born to where we can start to unhappen and happen things at will by use of the vacuum and tickling the vacuum into a specific pattern of negative energy added into the positive energy effects we already have. In theory, you can start to engineer and mess with, if you wish, anything. A few nations already have parts of this weaponized, unfortunately, for powerful weapons. The Soviets called it energetics, and they used it as a super weapons design mechanism. So we have some weapons in the world already. We have enough of that. What we need is some benefits in the world to help people rather than kill them or hurt them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with him more there. And just a quick shout out to the Kanzius device. I've been reading here. Looks like there was some drama and they all got pulled off the shelves like after they were already in use, which is real sketchy, right? Because, I mean, if they worked, right? And they had to have gone through a lot of tests to get to the point where they already had them in their labs and then to turn them on. Trust me on that one. And then this is just some random quote saying like they took them all out of our labs. What? So they can't do any more research using the Kanzius device anymore. That's not suspicious at all. That's not suspicious at all. So the whole thing just fell apart either due to money or what have you. Okay.
And to help the poor nations instead of further killing them in mass.
Oh, also Tom Bearden said that we are potentially already have these weapons. He said the Soviets already had weapons based on this, scalar type weapons. This is the stuff where like we just don't talk about. Neither side talks about it because it's just so scary to the public that these types of super weapons could exist.
And so forth. If we will use it for the benefit of humanity, it can have untold benefits. For example, in chemistry, we will be able to put together anything we want from just about anything. Take sand, make gasoline if you wish to. Eventually, I don't mean the next day after you start. It'll have to develop like any other technology. But the beginning of the technology is there and proven. The mechanism is proven experimentally and validated by independent people other than the inventor himself. So if we can ever get it born, we have a new kind of engineering, which I have called precursor engineering. Back to my little 3-term identity. Engineer the space-time itself, or the virtual particle flux of vacuum, which is the same thing, and use that to do the work you wish to do, and have it do the work for you. Do not have to brutally tear apart everything by sheer brute force. Get out of that kind of engineering that we've been in for a century and get into the engineering of precursor engineering. Engineer the precursor first, and then let the precursor format, which I call an engine, create the engine and its dynamics first from the precursor, virtual structure of vacuum, virtual particle flux, or space-time dynamics itself, for example, which is just energy structuring itself. And then let that interact with a mass system that you need to make changes in. And eventually, as the technology advances and is developed, we will be able to take anything and feed anything else to get what we need. So could we solve the energy crisis? Yes, we could. We could do it with the water gas and things like that very quickly. Salt water worked well in the Kanzius process. So you could take your water direct from the saline ocean. You'd have to handle the salt when it's left over. So once in a while, you could use some regular water and put that in. But we could have our cars with fairly simple adaptations to the present engines that we have, the present combustion processes we have, and we could be burning water in our cars right now to power them.
Yeah, I mean, this is crazy. Like, this is how sad it is. Tom Bearden's like, well, at least can we just get the water and just have a free, like, clean system? No, we can't even have that. Like, he's like, okay, if we can't have full free energy, which he knows is possible, he's like, can we at least try to convince people that we can just use water for combustion using like fusion? No, they won't even allow that to be possible. And it sounds like some sketchy stuff happened related to it. Jeremy just mentioned something too that previously, like, I just had a gut feeling about that. Like JFK, like when you listen to his speeches, it feels like he was taken out because he saw the future. Same way where we're talking about what does this lead to. Same way where Tom Bearden saying eventually you can produce anything you want. You can have a Star Trek replicator in the future, but we have to get to that level of technology. That's not the beginning infancy of that technology. Same way where the free energy is not just everybody has instant free, like literally free cost energy yet. That's not how it starts. It's where it ends, but it starts somewhere, you know?
We could be doing it. So, and that could be developed very rapidly. But the entire development, the entire technology that looms in the future is vastly important for all of us, because we will start to be able to overcome all these objections and things that so dirty and pollute the biosphere right now, because we're brute forcing everything with just gobs of energy and beating it and banging it and tearing it into position. We can have it just gently happen or unhappen into what we need and in the position we need. So one of the purposes we have is to try to point out, at least to the younger, more interested folks and to the physicists themselves, look, fellows, the end result of adding back that missing negative energy and then using it to tickle the vacuum and change space-time itself is a new kind of physics and a new kind of technology. And it's a unified physics. Nothing is accepted. We can engineer anything we can put our fingers on. And that's what we're coming into, hopefully, one of these days. And we will be able to clean up the biosphere, stop all the harsh chemicals we're pouring out and killing the mouths of all the rivers out in the ocean and all the dead zones and all the pollution we're pouring into the soils. And we won't have to worry about carbon sequestration. If you want to do carbon sequestration, go ahead and do it this way and take the carbon and change it into something else and let the vacuum do it for you. Do not brute force it and create all these dirty other things you got to dump in the biosphere. Just let the vacuum do it directly.
Unmuted. He's just talking all this smack. Like, if you guys want to burn carbon, like, here, do this in an efficient way. Let the vacuum do it in an efficient way. Stop trying to constantly destroy the dipole and rebuild it. He's like, look at the problem in a different way. You're just trying to keep the door held open. We don't need to constantly be opening and slamming the door. Although, ironically, the answer might be pulsed current, which is kind of like turning a switch on and off over and over again in the right resonance, right? Maybe a high frequency resonance. I don't know. But now this brings up the question, too. I'm going to go full screen for just 1 second here. Now it's not just the defense contractors. Now we're talking about the energy moguls and probably oil moguls in general, right? Because these people, if you're one of these people who's worth billions from oil money or whatever, boy, the value of oil is going to collapse. The futures on oils are going to be looking horrible. Price is going to just completely collapse. The price of energy is going to collapse as well. So this is the thing too. There's this, like, if you ask me who's the deep state, who is the covert elite, My answer would be look at corporations and then look at the politicians the corporations own, the ones they're paying all this money to. So the private military defense contractors, the oil companies, you know, the big ones, and then connected politicians. Only the politicians that are connected that are in the know. And it's not as many as you think. And then probably random people in the intelligence community that are like read in on the craziest shit. Because even there's going to be people in the intelligence community, many people, high-ranking military officers that also have no idea either. This isn't the kind of thing that like you don't just get access to this because you're a certain rank or some bullshit.
Who is Kanzius?
Dr. John Kanzius is a fellow who had some physics. He didn't major in physics. He's a scientist now who's become fairly well known. You can Google his name on the internet, John Kanzius, Kanzius, and you will find good coverage of everything I'm talking about. You will find good coverage of his cancer process. You will find the exact institute that's doing the work and the results of their preliminary phase 1 lab animal experiments, the startling results. You will find the independent test and replication and the actual name of that famous scientist who did that work to do that and prove it and validate the fact that it was real. What you won't find is Kanzius' statement of the mechanism, because apparently he doesn't understand that mechanism himself.
Instead of paying almost $4 for gas, how would you like to run your car on salt water? Now, it may sound crazy, but wait until you see what a local inventor has come up with that could change the world. And as Channel 3's Michael Mara shows us, that's not all he's trying to do.
Retired TV station owner and broadcast engineer John Kanzius was not looking for an answer to the energy crisis. He was looking for a way to cure cancer. 4 years ago, inspiration struck in the middle of the night. Why not use radio waves to kill the cancer cells?
The best thing that worked as antennas was I could find at 3 o'clock in the morning was my wife's pie pants.
His wife Marianne heard the noise and found her husband inventing a radio frequency generator using her pie pans.
I got up immediately and thought he'd lost it.
Here are the basics of John's idea. Radio waves will heat certain metals like gold. Tiny bits of that metal are injected into a cancer patient. Those nanoparticles are attracted to the abnormalities of the cancer cell and ignore the healthy cells. The patient is then exposed to radio waves and only the bad cells heat up and die. Killing cancer cells is amazing, but John had also stumbled on yet another amazing breakthrough.
You have enough in there?
His machine could actually burn salt water. John Kanzius discovered that his radio frequency generator could release the oxygen and hydrogen from salt water and create an incredibly intense flame.
Just like that. Inside a car cylinder, you can see the amount of fire that would be in the cylinder. I can put my hand in here.
Put your hand into the beam, nothing happens. Put in a fluorescent bulb and it lights up immediately. At the APV Company Laboratory in Akron, top engineers have checked out John's amazing invention and they were amazed.
And we saw it go up to 1,500 degrees centigrade, the temperature. And it's incredible.
This simple Stirling engine is running with the heat generated by the flames coming off that test tube. The fuel, nothing more than salt water.
Oh, that could be a steam engine, steam turbine. Could be a car engine if you wanted it to be.
That's the true American innovator. Someone that is not looking for something, he just finds it.
This is the most abundant element in the world, water. And salt water is everywhere. And to see it burn actually gives me chills.
So imagine the possibilities. Salt water as the ultimate clean fuel.
This is crazy. I mean, this is where Tom Bearden's like, okay, guys, the reason why this is happening is because he's applying some negative energy to the water. And then the water's breaking its bonds into hydrogen and oxygen. And then it's just literally burning. Literally burning at the top from breaking the bonds. And so now he's basically done exactly what Bearden said, which is apply a little negative energy here and then move the molecules to just a different area where they're not being affected by the negative energy. And then you just burn them like what he's doing, just moving it from one spot to another. Pretty wild. So now to me, the big question is, okay, how do you make a negative energy laser? I want a laser that just produces negative energy. Anything it hits, it just starts to get time reversed or whatever, unhappened. I want an unhappening laser, chat. You zap the laser and it just unhappens, people.
A happy byproduct of one man searching for a cure for cancer. In Erie, Pennsylvania, Michael Mara, Channel 3 News.
That is
amazing. Oh, so this was what? This has got to be like the late 90s, early 2000s. I mean, based on what she's dressed at like here. So, I mean, this was getting news coverage. And the guy didn't even understand how it was happening. I mean, they're looking at this and they're amazed. And what you look at that, the first thing you should think of is sonoluminescence. Because when we saw that flame there, that's the same idea as that when you just apply sound waves and the right resonance or whatever they do for sonoluminescence, why it can produce a little star in a jar. You know, you have this system, self-sustaining system that just starts up where it's just extracting energy directly from the vacuum.
Amazing. We want it now. Inventor John Kanzius says that if some big company wants to buy up his saltwater fuel invention, that's okay. He wants to use all the money to finish his quest to find a cure for cancer.
Our purpose is to advance the mechanism and say this sort of thing was removed from physics deliberately and arbitrarily and abruptly by people in mortal fear of being able to engineer physical reality itself. And that must be avoided, they thought, at any cost. We have to come back to grips with it because Some nations are already using it for weapons to help kill us quicker and better and more efficiently. We need to use it to help people, not kill them. Heal them, not kill them. Cure them. If we need to fuel our vehicles, let's make the fuel out of sand or rock or whatever, or out of empty space itself, and let's fuel the vehicles, and then let's sequester the carbon by just unhappening it. Let's don't put it in the biosphere to pop up later and give us the same old problem. Let's just unhappen it so it doesn't even exist.
So with regard to Kanzius's methodology.
So, I mean, this is the part where it's like we're manipulating the reality of the fabric of our, maybe the fabric of our reality. So then the question here is like, was this so dangerous that this is what they would hide? I think, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. This is something that's so big that I could see the government hiding it for our best interest, of course.
Not that much is known then about how he actually affects this process.
Except experimentally. The actual mechanism I just advanced has not been advanced by Kanzius because he doesn't know it. So far as I'm aware, it has not been advanced by physicists yet either, because the physicists are so constrained, they almost dare not look at anything like what Kanzius is doing if they value their careers and their salaries and their ability to publish in journals and just be a physicist. They risk their entire career by doing so. We have to stop that also. We have to stop this almost ruthless suppression of our present science to its status quo. I'm certainly not the first ones ever pointed that out. Lots of eminent scientists have pointed out that we don't ever get a major breakthrough by great scientific effort. We get it when the old guys who so adamantly oppose it finally die off and get out of the way, and the younger guys finally get a chance to come along and get a chance to work on it and get it done. So,
wow, that's sad right there, Chad. That's really sad. I mean, you just heard how is it suppressed? Simple. If you talk about it, you get blackballed. And the worst part is the government doesn't even have to control all these people. It's a self-sustaining model where people just gatekeep other people. That's the saddest part. A lot of people are out there like, oh, there's disinformation agents. The sad part is they're not even being paid for doing what they're doing. It's just the human condition. And it gets stuck. And sometimes you have to wait for people to die off. That's why when you guys hear me talking about this, I'm like, you know, we're 10 years too early, minimum, just to even have the conversation. Because for even like what Jeremy was saying, like, you know, people just don't even want to talk to you when you're talking about negative energy being possible. And you're like, well, I mean, it's an answer to the equations.
It takes us 50 years, for example.
I guess what I was relating to was, as you mentioned, the concept of water gas and the knowledge of the fact that one can burn water under the right circumstances has gone back several decades.
Yes.
And
yeah, like this is a good point too here though as well by Jeremy, which is that like you can see there's this established, like if you want to get your opinion of a UFO guy, you go to, you know, Avi Loeb, right? And this is what happens. It's like who you know, and that's how the information slowly gets out. And then you got these scientific celebrities or what have you, and they go on and turns out, well, I'll probably end up being one, and then this will all be a huge hypocritical statement, but you know, they kind of dictate what we're allowed to believe is possible. And then that feeds down to the patent officers, and this feeds down to the people who gatekeep the literature and the papers. That's why when people say, oh, just write a paper, they're basically saying like, go get your thing approved by somebody who's wearing a mask when they're driving in their car by themselves, right? Like, you know, it's impossible.
But various methods have been used to do it
Yes.
anecdotally.
Each to a different degree of how practical it was, how cheap it was, and so forth. And some of them weren't practical at all, but they did the job. I chose the Kanzius method because it used the most direct method I know,
which is electrical pulsing.
Yes, he just makes a froth of little tiny RF pulses in the container that's got the water in it. So throughout the water, we have these little tiny RF pulses of froth. The problem is, and how do you explain what the little froth of RF pulses is doing all through there? Because the little RF pulse itself does not have energy enough to break that OH bond at all. But what that does to the vacuum virtual particle flux is what we described. You see, that's what Kanzius is not aware of. Right. He's not aware of what it does to the vacuum. And then the vacuum works on all this assembly of underlying ongoing statistical interactions that are making all that stuff and making the water in the first place. So he has access to the mechanisms that can allow him to cause the OH bond just to unhappen, just to disappear. Well, if you go back to the basic axiom, and we're starting out with the thinking of Einstein to create this axiom to unify physics, and we're pointing out space-time is, you know, active fields and field dynamics, and it's a virtual particle flux if we're in quantum mechanics. If we make all this identical and then understand the underlying positive energy and additional negative energy and negative probabilities added to that, suddenly we can engineer the water, we can engineer the hydrogen bond, we can engineer all kinds of things, physical reality itself. That's what I'm interested in. The fact that we have a new science here, which has now just opened its eye and peeped out a little bit, which people have been crawling all around the edge and messing with a little bit, finding a little bit, a tiny bit of it, but thinking about it in different terms. We're trying to point out the terms that one thinks in it to do some rigorous physics and turn those physicists loose and let them do it. If we'll turn these sharp young fellows we have loose in the university and our sharp young professors loose in this area, and not ruin their careers and their reputations and all, and let them do it, they'll get it done. It'd curl your hair how fast they'll do it. But right now, there's a rigorous iron control on them. You must not do that because that's against everything we stand for.
That's wild. I mean, they're like basically saying there's people that will solve this immediately. Like the science is there. We already have it ready to go, but we're just being gatekept by a bunch of gatekeepers. Like that's really what he's saying here. Also, this is a really crazy comment. The more I think about this, the more I can't rule it out. Free energy is conscious. That's the big secret. All energy comes from it. That's what they're hiding. All energy is coming from one giant conscious being. Maybe we are all one person. That would be fucking wild, chat. But that kind of makes sense. All energy comes from it. So if you start tapping into free energy, like a ball of coherent energy that's replenishing itself, it can become conscious. Maybe this is the idea of where ball of energy can be conscious, how it can be conscious. Man, if that ends up being the case, shit's going to get really weird, chat.
When I hear the term negative probabilities, it to some degree turns me off because I think just in terms of it's just some mathematical figment on a piece of paper.
But all models are mathematical figments on a piece of paper. And the probabilities you see, when the probability reaches 100%, that's certainty. There it is. Probability is connected to certainty. Now, if the probability is less than 100%, it means you have it popping in and popping out. It's over here some, but it's not everywhere. It's not universal. If the probability reaches 100%, all the water falls apart. You see, of this thing I'm talking about. Now, when it reaches up at 100%, all the water stays water if it's just positive. But if I add in some negative energy and negative probabilities, you add the negative to the positive probability, suddenly it's not 100%. It's only 90%. So now some of the water molecules, the OH bonds are breaking, and I'm getting my hydrogen gas and my oxygen gas bubbles. And that's what I need if I want to run my combustion engine.
So most of our models are predicated on only positive possibilities.
That's correct. Because the physicists themselves, the leading physicists such as Heisenberg and Pauli particularly, beat the daylights out of all the other physicists that tried to resist that. And they tore that negative energy and those negative probabilities right back out of all the physics except QED. They couldn't get it out of quantum electrodynamics because you destroy the whole subject if you do. And it's fitted to experiments. So there's no question about it exists. So they couldn't get.
So they can't even get rid of negative energy because they have to have it in quantum mechanics. So general relativity is just being a bitch. Needs to step aside. This is why we're doing quantum mechanics, I decided, guys. Also, I am definitely getting dragged in the spiritual realm. And that's the thing, is like that's how it should work naturally. You shouldn't jump straight to the spiritual realm. You should build your foundation with the science, follow where the science goes. Even if you see it, you see the top from down here. Don't skip straight to the top, right? Build up to it, because that's how you'll get to the most logic-based answer. You might not still be right, but you'll get to an answer that you can be proud of in terms of what you think you believe in.
Get it out of that, but they tore it out of quantum field theory. They mutilated quantum field theory. They tore it out of Dirac's electron theory. But negative energy occurs in the Schrodinger equation. You cannot get rid of it and be doing legitimate physics. By the way, there's a very good man.
Schrodinger, baby. Schrodinger, you goddamn bastard. You bastard. You saved us, Schrodinger. He's like, nope, negative energy is not going away.
Dr. Dan Solomon, who has written some very rigorous papers now and had them.
He just name drops Dan Solomon in the middle of this. Guys, that paper I referenced a few weeks ago where we were doing Dirac holes, that was Dan Solomon. So all of a sudden, and yes, thank you, hit the like button. Tom Bearden is also referencing Dan Solomon. And Dan Solomon is sitting here talking about Dirac holes. And this, again, that's the idea that we're extracting the energy out and it's being instantly replenished. Like you're trying to drain the ocean. You just have no chance.
Published in leading journals, again opening up this question and pointing out that you cannot remove this negative energy and be doing legitimate physics. It's arbitrary, and you are mutilating physics when you do it. So I think we'll get it back in as soon as they will free the physicists up and let them do it, and that will turn the young physicists loose. And once they get loose, and young professors, we will have this thing developing like mad. They're very powerful forces, of course, that do not wish this done. You can imagine how your big pharmaceuticals feel about the fact that we don't have to all get old and be sick and taking expensive medication, like I'm a living example. And but if it could be done much simpler, and we could even reverse the effects of aging eventually. Wouldn't it be nice if you were 80-something years old waiting to die, but you still got around like a 33-year-old and had all the energy and pep and vim and vitality and the good health and everything? That would be nice, wouldn't it? Dying wouldn't be so bad. And so we have to get it to happen, because in a lot of places in the world, in the poor populations and so forth, the conditions are so harsh and their life is so harsh. If you've ever gone to Haiti and walked off the main tourist roads, walk back into cities, walk back several blocks away, and now start looking at what's going on. you will see little children, 7 years old, whose parents are all dead, on the street, nobody taking care of them, eating out of garbage, scrapping through the garbage, trying to find anything to eat. I sat and watched a little 7-year-old girl, so about 7, I don't know how old she actually was, 6 or 7, hopeless, no parents apparently, nobody taking care of, drinking water out of an open sewer with human excrement floating in the sewer where she was drinking.
Okay, that's enough of that. So basically, we want to help people.
They all have their evil entourages, some of them quite well established. We have presented evidence on our website for the reader to make up his own mind of the fact that the DOE apparently stepped in and took over already patented process for easily making permanent magnets with asymmetric fields laterally. Well, if you have access to permanent magnets that have a broken symmetry laterally between the strength of the field on the left side and strength of the field on the right side, any fool can assemble self-powering permanent magnet motors in 5 minutes, given a couple of magnets like that. So if you have a reasonable, cheap process, very efficient, very easy to make such permanent magnets, you have already achieved the ability to go to self-powered permanent magnet motors and motor generators.
Whoa. Asymmetrical magnet will immediately allow any idiot off the street to make a magnet-based over Unity device. I did not know that. That's really useful information. I'm going to write this down. I might actually drop this knowledge. Asymmetrical. So that's like how, like, just to show, that's just a flex, like to show how easy and how close we are. All we really need, and he's basically saying they stole this invention where they could make a magnet and have an asymmetrical flux. So like one side of it is more powerful than the other side. If one side is weaker than the other side and the other side is more powerful, then he's like, you can easily create a magnetic motor that way, because all you're looking for is an asymmetry that you're trying to exploit. Asymmetry just means it's not the same on both sides. You're looking for something that's not homogeneous. You want there to be a disturbance that you're going to exploit. In this case, a lot of times we're talking about it from a charge perspective, positive, negative charges. So our dipole, keeping our dipole open, that's an asymmetry. So we're just trying to create an asymmetry with electrical engineering that we can exploit.
That patent was originally filed and obtained by 2 inventors as a U.S. patent in 1990. The patent is on our website. Tony Craddock posted it there. The abstract of the patent is there, so you can see what they're talking about. An easy process to make that kind of magnet. It turns out the DOE picked up on that, and DOE stepped in and took a leading inventor, takes him off and gives him a big government grant, and then has him repatent with an international patent, the same process, change a word here or two there, and insert the fact that the words that to the fact that all of this work was done under this government grant. So the U.S. government has a special interest in this patent. The gobbledygook means the U.S. government, that is the Department of Energy, controls the patent and the process absolutely. They then had him patent the thing with a U.S. patent again in 2004. Again, change a few words here and there. So what we're saying is there's strong evidence with those 3 patents. If you understand what broken symmetry is and what powers a motor in the first place, there's very strong evidence that our own Department of Energy has had and suppressed legitimate processes for permanent magnet self-powered motors and motor generators since at least 2001. They would have had to test the things with the grant and to show that they did work. So they've had self-powering permanent magnet motors and motor generators since 2001. And apparently kept it secret from the U.S. president, from the U.S. Congress, and from the U.S. public, which is why we have it posted on our website, and we have abstracts from the patent there so the reader can read and make up his or her own mind as to what's actually going on there.
Wow. So he just said, at least since 2001, we've had permanent magnetic motors that are over Unity devices, perpetual motion machines. That's what he just said right there. 56 minutes in. The DOE knows, and they kept it from the president. So that's 24 years. So at least since then, probably longer.
The world isn't as simple as just DOE is part of the solution. They're often part of the problem, not part of the solution. That's because all the large organizations, all of them, have their own evil entourages.
Tom, I have a question about the Kanzius cure for cancer. In that several years ago, you published a paper on a potential curing methodology of cancer called the portal process. And I'm wondering how compatible the Kanzius process is with the portal process. Is it, I mean, is it?
It's in general compatible, but the Kanzius process is much more specific. I was still struggling with it, and I got closer to it, and I got down to being able to describe the process, but not give you the specific exact mechanism. in detail like I've just done. I wasn't in position to do it. It took a lot more study and a lot more reading. And particularly we had to bring in what happens if you really do tickle the vacuum and you introduce negative energy and negative probabilities. I did not have that in the porthole concept. I was still struggling to get at that. Now, John Bearden has used negative energy and that sort of thing in his superb battery charging processes, which will unhappen the bad things that happen in the battery and restore it to like new condition or better than new. He's been using this negative energy and so forth for 25 years on the bench in actual processes. So he has worked out ways to use it to, for example, sulfation that goes on in a battery and ruins it. It just unhappens, the sulfation's all gone. It's gone, it unhappens and it disappears, it's out of there. So a battery that had been recharged several times by his process becomes better than a brand new one. It will accept more charge and put out more juice than a brand new battery like it.
Yeah, we have John on camera.
Yeah, so these are all really interesting because I think that a lot of these guys, it really becomes a situation of who's figured it out. And when you figure it out, you can engineer it in a lot of different ways. And then it just becomes a matter of like, what's the economical way? This is why when I tell people like it's a commercialization challenge. It's not even a challenge of proving to people it's real. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how many times you show it to people. The moment you're selling it to people, then that's it, right? Like you just let the free market decide, you know? DOE probably is watching. I wouldn't surprise me at all, but not them directly. Like this is when he says they have their entourages. He's saying they basically have their own private companies that they outsource all the stuff to. So that's why there's so many contractors. So you've got these contractors and you say, I'm going to outsource my security to this private military defense contractor that does, maybe let's say they have a specialized force for, they call it their cyber warfare division. But really what it is just fucking ruining people's lives with their hacking tools that nobody knows about. Or in terms of like, free energy aspects, just give somebody a heart attack and maybe walk away. Or just ruin their life, man. Do it in a crazy ass way.
Showing us where on the scopes where it goes negative.
Yes. Yeah. And this negative energy was originally discovered by Tesla. Give him credit for what he discovered. Tesla had discovered that, as he put it, the medium is active, the medium through which energy is transferred. That's space-time. The medium itself is active, and you can get energy directly out of the medium. You don't have to burn fuel. You don't have to consume any kind of fuel or material to get your energy if you're clever enough with the system. And he had discovered several ways to do it with circuits. How do I know that? How do I know Tesla wasn't a kook? Because one of the great, really fine scientists of our day, higher group field theory electrodynamicist and a co-founder of ultra-wideband radar is Terry Barrett. Dr. Barrett did a very rigorous quaternion electrodynamics, very close to Maxwell's original theory, quaternion electrodynamics analysis of some of Tesla's actual patented circuits, and found that Tesla could do exactly what he said he could do. He could shuttle the potential energy collected in that circuit around as he wished, wherever he wished, and dissipate it wherever he wished. He didn't have to use half of it to come back over and destroy the source dipole inside the generator. So Tesla had discovered what we would technically call an asymmetric circuit that is capable of doing that. In 1892, J.P. Morgan had his henchman elicit Lorentz to change the Heaviside Equations, which were being considered to use to set up a new thing in all our universities to be called electrical engineering. It wasn't born yet, but they were just in the process of creating it. Maxwell had died in 1879. Everybody hated quaternions. They jumped in and tore all that apart. And it's much simpler equations of Heaviside they were going to use. But Morgan, because he was suppressing Tesla, and Tesla was onto this free energy business, that was one of the things he was out to suppress also. He had his scientific advisors do an analysis to tell him if those equations they were going to use had any of these crazy objectionable Tesla energy from the environment, energy from the medium system. Well, we've had group theory in our universities over in physics since 1870. A really good physicist today knows group theory. So his leading advisors were the best scientists the money could buy. They had no problem in doing a group theory analysis and finding out that Heaviside's equations were still asymmetric. They still contained some of those crazy Tesla systems. Well, he was a ruthless empire builder. Morgan's simple response was fix it. So they elicited Lorentz. Lorentz was a great scientist, but he was unfortunately noted for taking other people's work, for example, and using it and taking credit for it himself. He was noted for doing that. J.D. Jackson and Open blew the whistle on him in a paper they published in the Hard Literature, pointing out what he did and who he stole it from. So he borrowed some work that Lorentz, without the P, had previously done in symmetrizing those equations, and simply came up with symmetrical, mutilated Heaviside equations that threw out all those forbidden Tesla systems. And so our electrical engineers, from the very birth of electrical engineering itself, have been trained to think, design, build, and deploy only symmetrical systems that take half of their free energy they take from the vacuum and use it to do nothing but destroy the source dipole in the generator or source that is providing the free energy flow from the vacuum in the first place. So they can build only a symmetrical system, and to do self-powering and solve the energy crisis, you need asymmetric systems, which means you got to go back and you got to undo that crazy symmetrization of Heaviside equations. That's the least you got to do.
Huh. So yeah, it's just a matter of engineering it. Now I'm starting to see it now. I mean, I already was starting to kind of see the basics, but now I'm seeing the engineering aspects of it as well. So it's not actually Maxwell that we should be mad at. It sounds like we should be mad at Lenz without the T, right? Not Lenz, L-E-N-Z. So Lenz is the one that fixed the Maxwell equations so they'd be symmetric. So there was no way to create an asymmetry using the Maxwell equations. And then what happens, the downstream impact here is that the physicists don't think it's mathematically possible, an asymmetry of this nature. But we can actually physically create the asymmetry. So, Lorenz without the T. That's how it is. Okay, Lorenz, not Lenz. Lorenz. Yeah, they fixed the equations because J.P. Morgan was censoring Tesla, and Tesla was just pulling energy straight out of the vacuum. So this is why it's so crazy that this is actually it's as good as like a movie. It feels fictional because it's just so crazy, but it seems like it actually happened, and this is why we're so far behind on the science of the ether and the energy, and why we can't answer basic questions. Like if you go to the patent people and you say, "What even is energy? Where does it come from?" What do they even say? No, I think he said no T there. I think there's one without a T, Lorentz. Or did he say with a T? Whatever.
Evans, who's a tremendous theorist, took a good, hard theoretical look at the symmetrization of those equations and showed very rigorously in a paper published in Physica Scripta that if you remove that artificial limitation imposed on our electrical engineers, they will then be able to build asymmetric circuits, circuits that can be made self-powering, that will pull all their energy from the vacuum, and you won't have to burn any material or consume any fuel or anything. You will be able to do it once you make that simple change. The problem is electrical engineers are not taught any group theory. And most of them, if you say you're building symmetrical circuits because your equations are symmetrical, and to do what we're talking about, you don't even have an active vacuum, an active spacetime in your theory. To do this, you have to modify your theory and remove that limitation and start to build asymmetric systems. He has no idea what you're talking about. I will refer to statement by two Nobel Prize winners together. I'm talking about Weinberg, and I'm talking about Feynman. They wrote a paper together, and they pointed out in there a little quotation I'm quite fond of, where they said it's increasingly, every year it becomes even deeper, made aware that the deepest and most penetrating insight you can have into physical systems at all and models is group theory. So if you make a precise group theory statement about a model, you have said a very specific thing of great importance. And as Evans pointed out, if you want to be able to build systems that take their energy freely from the active environment and that self-power themselves with that energy they're taking from it all the time, you're going to have to remove that silly, quote, silly, actually diabolical and deliberate symmetrization of those Heaviside equations that J.P. Morgan paid to have fixed by Lorentz in 1892.
It was Lorentz. Okay. So 1892, he said. So 1892, they fixed the Heaviside equations. So this is why we've been a species, we've been a country at least, with brainwashed, who's been brainwashed away. That basically we think the Maxwell equations, and the specific one is the change in the magnetic field equals 0 or whatever it was. I think is that the one? Del cross operator times B magnetic field equals 0. That's the one that should be equal to A. And the moment it becomes equal to A, then you can find the asymmetries mathematically, where you can then realize that you can create a free energy device. Interesting.
You were talking about the vertical coming up from the energy through the atom molecule and something bond at the top. Can you go through that again?
Yes, sure. We were talking about at that time water gas, and while there are really several processes that can be used for water gas, the best one, most efficient one, and the easiest one to get it to do, and cheapest one, is this one that Kanzius uses. I'm not sure he knows the process, but he does use it, and it works good. He uses it in both his cancer curing process, and in his water gas process. And to explain it, what we do is we start back with our little 3 triad terms. Remember, we've got to start there. We have virtual particle flux is identically space-time is identically energy. This is the grand unified field theory axiom. Okay, this means that we can start discussing this in each one of these areas. We could start over in energy and just discuss the energy, or we could discuss just the space-time and try to keep it pure relativity, or we could discuss just the virtual particle flux and nothing else and try to keep it pure quantum mechanics. But what we said is we can discuss all three, and now we can understand it if we understand this axiom. Anytime we're discussing one thing, we're discussing all three of them. So let's start with the virtual particle flux, because we're starting with the idea of some particles. Now, the thing we have to eliminate, there's no emptiness. There's no emptiness appearing here anywhere.
Quick question. By virtual, you mean it's not observable?
It's below the observable threshold, which is 1 quantum in size. A quantum is made of angular momentum, energy times time. And so the multiplication of the time of the observation and the energy of the thing in there is smaller than the instrument can detect, because it's smaller than the quantum. Then you can even detect by any instrument. Now, if it gets up to quantum, then a good instrument will detect it. It's a photon now, you see, that makes the light we see coming in our eyes. Our eyes will detect it. So what I'm doing is starting below the observable state. I'm starting down where it's first beginning, where we would normally say, well, there's nothing down there but empty space. No, there is no emptiness. There's nothing up here anywhere that says empty. If I read what Einstein said about space-time, he said it doesn't have any independent existence. It's really talking about all the fields and their dynamics and all like that. You can't separate it from the fields. It is the fields, you see. It is the energy. So if I start down here, I'm using the particle approach with the virtual particle flux, but I'm way down below where you can see it or observe it with an instrument.
He's basically saying there is an ether, there is an energy that's there. That's what space-time is. And then he's saying there's this unobservable state where it gets too small, below the quantum state. These are the virtual particles. I mean, this is like the particles coming into our existence. So when people ask you where energy comes from, your answer should be from the 0-point fluctuations all around us. This is where all energy comes from. Like everywhere where you're getting energy. It's not like traveling from the power station to your line. It's not physically traveling that entire distance.
But it's boiling away, and there is no emptiness. It's just everything boiling. Particles, you make them different size, whatever, they're just boiling away and interacting. Okay, as I move up, the reason I would move up, these particles have a certain amount of energy. And a couple of them get together and bind together as a new kind of thing, and that's got more energy. So it starts progressing up the line. Some of the higher energy stuff interacts to make another jump, then another jump. So if I'm just tracing positive energy and the probabilities for positive of these things happening, they start happening and less happening. I get up here, suddenly I went through the observable threshold. I got photons. I now got to electrons, I got to the protons, and I got to the nuclei and all these stuff. I got the quarks, everything all boiling here and interacting higher. So I got atoms. Now I got atoms interacting. I got molecules. And in the molecules, I had to have bonds holding these atoms together. So the last thing that happened to go from the atom to the molecule was the formation of the bonds that bond the atoms into molecules. Well, in the water molecule, that turns out to be OH, because it's the oxygen atom and the hydrogen atom that I'm putting together to make the water. And so that bond then between the hydrogen and the oxygen is the last thing that happened to give me the water molecule. Got it tied together now, and I got water. Okay. If I've got all this stuff sticking here, and all this is boiling away all the time, bigger level and higher and so forth, but it's all based on this dynamic set of structures all the way down to the very beginning. And what I have is a set of interlocking operations that are continually creating and continually replenishing that oxygen, that OH bond, and making that water molecule, making the parts and making the bond that holds it together. It's not a thing that I just have the oxygen and there it is. It's the fact that that oxygen and all the parts of it and all in the hydrogen-oxygen bond is being continually created and continually sustained and replenished by this whole set of operations. That's energy, isn't it? Energetic everywhere. So what happens is, if I reach down here and I put in negative energy, that has negative probabilities. Everywhere there was a probability for an operation, I'm lowering it a little bit, little by little by little. Well, up here, the last thing that had the least probability to occur was that OH bond. Because I can have hydrogen and oxygen without having an OH bond. So if suddenly I have probability that it's not there, it begins to disappear, just vanish out of so many certain percentage of the water molecules. And that frees the hydrogen and oxygen. So I start to get hydrogen bubbles and oxygen bubbles free in my water bubbling around here, just appearing out of nowhere because I'm unhappening some of those water molecule bonds, the OH bonds that tied it together.
So this is a little repetitious, but on the positive side, Scarlett Johansson clone has arrived, guys. I am selling out. Guys, free energy was a scam. This is all a big scam. You fell for it. My Scarlett Johansson clone finally arrived. Goodbye, world. I'll see you later. What if I just turned my stream off there and I never streamed again after that? That was a good one, Scarlett Johansson clone.
Well, that's interesting because now it gives me fuel. All I had to pay was a little tickling to do with the vacuum to cause it to have that negative energy froth. I didn't have to use much energy at all. I didn't have to use enough to tear apart that molecule by brute force and pull it apart and have the oxygen and hydrogen that I had brutally torn apart. I don't have to do that at all. It just pow, and it starts to appear because I start to unhappen some of the bonds. The negative energy does it for me. The vacuum is doing it for me by working on this whole structure. And so if I want to use that hydrogen and oxygen, I got to get them out of this water, this area, because in this container where I'm doing this, that's where I'm tickling my vacuum to get my negative energy and get that happening. In other words, I'm making the OH bond very difficult in this region.
Guys, I can't get over the tickle talk. He's saying the word tickle an uncomfortable amount of times for a man his age. We should just probably come up with a different term, but now that we've called it Tickle Talk, it's going to be called Tickle Talk for the rest of the time. Guys, we're tickling the vacuum. Guys, I'm going to go on a major podcast. I'm going to say we're tickling the vacuum. We tickle the vacuum. I might actually do it. Might actually just do it.
It can be made, but with very difficult. It's very hard for the hydrogen and the oxygen to bond together in here now and produce water. They got to do that to explode or burn. It's got to unite to make water. And now that's very hard to do. That's inhibited. It's not totally inhibited, but it's, pretty strongly inhibited in this area. So it's not too dangerous at all. But now if I will pipe, but I can't burn that in that fashion in there, say. But if I pipe those bubbles of gas away from this container where I've been tickling the vacuum, and I get it over here into the combustion chamber of a combustion engine, where my normal vacuum here now is normal. I hadn't got that negative engine. I'm not tickling that vacuum. And so now all of a sudden it loves the OH bar. Easy to make. Bingo, it'll burn like mad as fuel and come out as water vapor out the end and power my engine. So I put in a lot less energy to tickle this vacuum to get the power going to my engine to power this engine than the work I got out of the engine doing for me. I put in paid just a little bit to get a lot, see? And so it makes...
He's tickling the vacuum, guys, like a lot. No, a little bit. Apparently you can't say the word moist. It really offends people. I'm going to start working the word moist into all my interviews from now on. I'll work it in somehow. Oh, that question was really moist. If anybody asks me about debunk stuff, I'm just going to say that question is really moist. Just see how they react.
Makes sense now, and it's all clean. I put in water, I got out water vapor, and that's it. I didn't have any carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide and all kinds of poisonous compounds being made into combustion and dumped in the biosphere. No, I don't have any of that. So what I have is a very clean system which can be used to power engines. It's fuel. Anything you can use fuel for, you can power. You can heat your home, whatever, with if you had to. So if I'm going to do hydrogen heating, though, I'd want to be very careful because once you get it in a normal vacuum, it's very explosive. A little spark and you're gone. So I would prefer to keep it with combustion engines until I really learned how to control it a lot better. But look at what this opens up. Automobiles, trucks, diesel trucks included. It opens up anything I need combustion chambers and combustion engines, ships, trains. I could put it in a jet combustion system in an airplane and have jet exhaust from this thing powering my plane. So suddenly I have a vast array of applications that I can use this for. And it's cheap. Once it's developed and used, it's cheap, it's clean. And if I take the salt water right out of the ocean, I have an essentially unlimited supply because I'm putting water back. I'll have to put the salt back too somewhere. But I've greatly reduced the number of pollutants and all of this I'm trying to juggle and handle. I don't have hardly any at all.
So first of all, I'm going to work the word moist into just casual conversation here. I want it to be like one of my top 10 words. That's moist. I might even just use it as just like a little thing, my catchphrase I say. That's so moist. Okay, anyway, Tom Bearden's basically saying like we don't have to redo all of our engines. We don't have to like go straight to 0 point energy. People are afraid of 0 point energy. We can use the engines that are out there already, and we can just have them run water instead. So we can keep all our manufacturing. It's basically making these obsolete engines. So that way people's feelings won't be hurt too much. Tom Bearden's basically being extra woke right now, explaining it. Okay, that was moist. Let's keep going.
Salt's the only thing I can point at. So it would offer a great thing to do to capitalize on the investment, the huge investment in the world in combustion engines we already got. We can adapt them. There's all kinds of companies out there now trying to sell you adapters for your, to burn some water, burn a little bit in your engine. Some work some work fairly well, some don't work well at all. It's a vast, crazy area. But the point is there is a real science here. We need to get it scientifically done and perfected and used, like with the proven Kanzius process, and improve each part of this when we develop it like we would with a normal product, so that when we come out with a modification, it's a good, solid modification and relatively inexpensive. We don't want something cost $50,000, but if it costs $500, that's all right. So now I can burn water instead of gas.
So here how funny is that? He says if it's $50,000, it's too much. Yeah, I don't know. Apparently, but if it's $500, it's no problem, right? And so now you start to realize the economic issue is like anything over $50,000 is too much for people. Even if it's free energy, it's just you're not getting your money back fast enough. And then there's like other issues in terms of like actually trying to, do you keep it running? Because if so, you need to keep using the energy. Otherwise, you're just building up energy and you have to release it safely.
So this is the kind of development we want. But the main thing it focuses our mind on is this funny little triad. VPF is identically space-time, is identically energy. And it tells me when I have everything I'm normally taking for granted in my observable universe, I can engineer, in theory, any part of that by being able to engineer its creator. This little wiggles and all they get together to form that. If I learn to engineer that froth of tickling of the vacuum for the negative energy and put patterns and forms and dynamics in it to what I wish, I can engineer only a set of dynamics in here, a specific one. Well, what I want to do is I want a set of dynamics that won't do anything but cure HIV. Bingo. There is one. It'll take me some time and effort and research to discover it and develop it, but it's there. It's there. And it's a lot cheaper than building these very expensive drugs and then drugging everybody to death. So everything that I want to do, because I'm now engineering the actual creation and sustaining of physical reality at every level, eventually I'm going to be able to engineer every level at will. Let's make it beneficial. They're going to do weapons. Let's do some things that are beneficial to human beings. Let's cure the diseases. Work out specific patterns and engines for every dread disease that's just harming jillions of people now, particularly poor people. Let's do something that cleans up our biosphere. It doesn't pollute it. Let's do something that makes it cheaper on us, so we're not having our working class just rammed right down through the floor. And we are able to pay for the fuel for our cars. Let's do something that can be adapted so that can progress gradually over the years, but can do a lot of good right now with what we have. We can do adaptation of the already great capital investment. So this would be the main principle we want to look at. Let's look at something that can be done quickly, but that has continuing development looking at you that will allow you to continually to grow. Let's capitalize on what we've got now and gradually go to things better and more advanced. But we've got trillions of dollars invested in our present electrical power system. Let's just don't junk the whole thing. We don't have to go spend gobs and gobs of money. We use part of the system we already got in almost all our power systems. So let's optimize what we're talking about. Let's optimize the problem looking at us. And the optimization is, number one, let us sharply separate the provision of the energy from the collection and use of the energy and what it does. Number two, let's take a hard look at what we already have vast investments in for energy and power and all this. Let's see what we have possibly available we could develop that uses a great deal of that and doesn't throw away all that capital investment, and then slides gently into gradually replacing it over the years. This is the kind of approach I would recommend, and I would recommend, just like Al Gore recommends, a Manhattan-type project to do it, but funded in this direction. Accenting that it's a physics problem, it is not an electrical engineering power problem.
He literally said that we should, and he talked about Al Gore. So this is like got to be late 90s, early 2000s. So he references Al Gore and he says we should make a Manhattan project related to this. What if we already did? What if we already did? That's a weird reference for him to bring that up. But the one thing he brings up there is really important for everybody to visualize. I know it's getting late, but the separating of the generation of the energy to the use of the energy. We have to separate those two concepts. That's really powerful to think about. It's like, we have to have an ability where we have a place where we're generating this energy that's centralized, and then it's being distributed, wherever we need it to go. And then we talk about how we use the energy, because how we use the energy is the big thing. Now, the question here is, if you're somebody like me who's a libertarian, how do we do that without having a centralized structure? People want a decentralized structure, but it's dangerous. If you have unlimited energy, you can build up, you can cause major, major damage.
We broke electrical engineering when we separated the windmill from the energy wind flow, when we separated and were able to build an asymmetric system from the energy wind source. So if we do it this way, I think we'll use maximum use of the resources we have.
It's crazy. He used the windmill analogy there as well, right? So when people come at you with the second law of thermodynamics, you just tell them that you open your system up to the ocean of energy. Once you've opened your system up to that ocean of energy, there's no violation. And you can also quote, I think it's Puthoff and Cole that did a look on the extraction of energy from the environment and found that it didn't actually violate any laws of the thermodynamics from a mathematical perspective.
Gradually adapt them and gradually use everything and gradually develop new ones and better ones and cheaper ones and more efficient ones. And we'll clean up the biosphere at the same time. We'll be using much cleaner processes. We will also have a much more unlimited area of engineering that we're available to do, because now we can gradually start to engineer physical reality itself. Wouldn't it be nice if I could reverse the effects of aging and be like I was again at 35, bright-eyed and vim and vigor and vitality? That would be nice. Go to an old folks nursing home where people are really sick and really, really hurting bad, and look at it, and it'll tear your heart out. Go into any poor country where the little kids are starving, their parents are dead of diseases and all, and it'll tear your heart out. And we can do better than that. Our science can do better than that. But somehow we got to break out from this rigorous control system that does not wish us to ever separate that windmill system from the energy source. No, you're going to leave them welded together. You're going to kill your source faster than your power load. That's all we're going to let you build. And if you want to build something else, we're going to kill you. We've got to break that up. Because they're going to build weapons out of it. They're going to build things that kill people. And all. We always got the people who want to do that. But it's time we use it for the great benefit of humanity. Eventually, we'll be able to engineer the food right out of emptiness, so-called emptiness, the virtual particle flux. Eventually, we'll be able to make the food we need. We will be able to make it the right kind of food, too. It won't have to be genetically modified food. So I got my fingers on your seed, and you are not going to be able to plant as you wish. You're going to have to come to.
Okay, so he talks about Monsanto here and them, planting all the seeds or what have you. But he basically says we can make a Star Trek replicator in the future. And I agree. If you can manipulate molecules to this level, it's just a matter of how precision you can make it.
Future. Clean up the environment crisis, because we will be able to stop all this kind of pollution we're doing now as we learn to do the proper kind of engineering. This is what the future holds if we can get it going. But if we're working through this rigorous control right now that says you are never going to be allowed to get it born, and we're going to do whatever we have to do to see that you don't, including kill you inventors if we have to. Or we'll do whatever else we got to do, harsh control measures. We'll take away your liberty. We'll change your laws, whatever. We will do whatever we have to do to control you. We have to break that up. It's kind of like our forefathers had the same problem looking at them, didn't they? And they realized they had a problem. And when they set up the Constitution of the United States, they tried to set up a document which declared, we wish to have independent people. I'm not talking about illegal people. I'm not talking about people that go shooting people and things like that. I'm talking about people that are responsible citizens, but are free to act as a responsible citizen.
Bro, Tom Bearden being a constitutionalist libertarian, I love it. You can just tell, right? He's like, this is why America has a constitution. This is why America's the GOAT of all, because we have the ability of individual liberty. And when you look at this in the long term, in terms of this technology, you realize like there's big questions you have to ask about the dangers of the technology and how much individual liberty we have. We're not talking about even rifles or nukes anymore. We're talking about, universe, galaxy ending type technology.
We have to get that in our scientific community. They are not free to act as a responsible scientist today. They are only free to act for what they're funded to act for. And the funding is controlled by what the people with the funds want, not what the scientific community could do or what should be done. One of Morgan's advisors through Edison, because he was advisor to the Edison company in Europe, was Fleming, a great scientist. And I always thought Fleming had an absolutely impeccable character, Oh boy, that's not true at all. We found notes from him, letters from him to Marconi, when he was sort of helping Marconi find a way around Tesla's patent. Tesla had already patented radio. Marconi came along, stole everything he did from Tesla. And Fleming helped advise him how to do it, to get around the patent law, try to.
That's Alexander Fleming.
Alexander Fleming was the guy that invented penicillin.
No, not that one. This is, I forget what his first name is. But anyway, that all happened, and it's documented by his letters that later got published in his papers and all, where he wrote, Marconi flatly advised him how to violate Tesla's legitimate patents. So in 1943, one of the companies that was building some Tesla stuff with those radio stuff based on these patents, Marconi sued them. And it went to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the U.S. Supreme Court upheld Tesla's priority. They basically said Marconi stole everything he did from Nikola Tesla. And they threw it right out of court. Tesla had already died. It was the year he died, but they threw it right out of court in 1943. The science textbooks won't publish that fact.
Yeah.
They still give Marconi credit for inventing the radio. He did not. So you see, science has got a history that's not too clean either. If you get this, got that evil entourage in it any way you go. And it still has today. That's the other thing. These young fellows, they can get the heck kicked out of them. They can have a fellowship pulled. They can be booted right out of university if they get too insistent. That's the reason I advise them. Don't argue with your professors. Do not question them. That guy's got a mission. He's trying to lay out some stuff for you to learn and apply. You get it. You learn to apply it on those exams so you get your grade, and you keep it that way till you get your doctorate degree safely in your hand. Otherwise, your fellowship can be pulled and you can be booted right out of university. So we shouldn't have to do that or say that to somebody, but that's the situation.
So yeah, that video is wild. A lot of good clips in that video, I would say. Tom Bearden engineering the vacuum. It becomes even more than just if you didn't think that EM drive, warp drive, wormholes, and free energy was enough, then we've also got just literally manipulating reality, like just actual replicator being possible, being able to cure all diseases at some point in the future, not now, but some point in the future. And the main holdup being, how do we target the specific cells that we want to attack? That's really the only holdup that we have. And what makes all this stuff possible? Negative energy. That's what we need. Just negative energy. And we know it exists because of the Casimir effect. Just remember the Casimir effect? We got to bring it up all the time. The plates come together. It shows a negative energy pressure differential. Then we just adjust our model of physics and we say, okay, space isn't empty. There's stuff here. And now we're going to extract that energy. And then when we look at a circuit, what is there a symmetry in a circuit as well? I don't know. Just something to think about, guys. Okay. Still got a lot more to learn, but I think we've made some pretty good progress here in general. Oh, Lone Wolf. Wanted to say you did a great job on Viva Fry today. Sadly, his community isn't quite ready to open their minds, not even slightly. Was disappointing for me, but the interview was fantastic. Nailed it. Yeah, it was pretty off the cuff. I appreciated it. I thought he was chill. He was cool. I wanted something a little bit more. I'm kind of bored with easy interviews. Like there's just not anybody at the level that can hit all the investigative standpoints and the physics standpoints. I think, in the next interview, to be honest with you guys, I'm probably going to try to bait out some physicists to try to push back. I'm not exactly sure the right method to do that, but I got to make sure that the science that I push is rock solid. And I probably have to reference a few of the papers as well so that people go read them and then they try to debunk it. Because that's what you do. You kind of bait these people a little bit. I might even say one thing like intentionally incorrectly if it's like minor, just to like throw them off, just to get people to like bite. I know how to troll, guys. We'll see. Okay. Okay, guys. I hope you appreciate it. I'm gonna retweet the stream or the interview with Viva Fry either later tonight or tomorrow morning. If you want to watch it, it's on Twitter. And then, yeah, Friday, we're going to talk about free energy. I might start putting together some of the science stuff as well. Next week's streams will probably be focused on putting together the evidence so I can get it to the podcaster before the show. Okay, guys. Hope you guys had a good night. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace, everybody. What are we going to play us out with? I might go back to it. No, we got to do the negative energy thing. Just too perfect.
In the fields where the skies are wide, talking about a journey through the cosmic ride. Einstein and Thorne, they set the stage for a trip through time across the space age. Wormholes connect distant points in space, traversable paths to a far-off place. No black holes pull, no crushing weight, just a cosmic tunnel to a distant gate. Talking wormholes, stargates, negative energy, travel through the cosmos, it's our destiny. MH370, where did it go? Bowling 777 through a wormhole flow. We're talking wormholes, stargates, negative energy, travel through the cosmos, it's our destiny. MH370, where did it go? Bowling 777 through a wormhole flow. Exotic matter, negative energy's the key to stabilize the wormhole for you and me. Quantum vacuum squeezed so tight, creating conditions for this wondrous flight. Static fields and lasers in the lab they play, generating forces in a new kind of way. Gravitational squeezing, Casimir's force, negative zones we need to stay the course. Talking wormholes, stargates, negative energy, travel through the cosmos, it's our destiny. MH370, where did it go? Boeing 777 through a wormhole flow. Thin shell formalism plates so fine, spherical geometry we realign. Energy conditions that we must defy. For a stable wormhole, let's give it a try. Forces balancing the plate, creating the throat, open the gates, from Earth to the stars in a single bound, a shortcut through space profound. Engineers and dreamers hold the key to future worlds and what we could be. With science in hand, we forge ahead through the cosmic paths that we now tread. We're talking wormholes, stargates, negative energy, travel through the cosmos, it's our destiny. MH370, where did it go? Boeing 777 through a wormhole flow. From the fields to the stars, we break the chains. Understanding the universe, we make the gains. Lil Hula Crunk shines, bringing truth to light. Through his music, we'll explore the night. With wormholes and stargates, our path is clear. Exploring the cosmos, our future.